Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Round Table. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de Úsala Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Round Table, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal, from the city of brotherly love. Les habla Fernando Mendez, and we have Danny Ramos controlando la máquina digital. We have a special guest today, Drew Murrey, one of my colleagues here at Úsala. And so, Drew, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna gloat a little bit today, Mr. Mendez.
Well, I'm going to try to stop you from gloating. The whole idea is that we bring you here to represent the wrong side of all the issues that we're going to discuss today. So, and we have also, in addition to Drew here by my side, we're going to host two people. Leticia Roa Nixon. I don't know if Danny can bring her on the show, but hello, Leticia.
Hi.
And so we just did the introduction, and we also have a person who just got elected, and he was here before the election. I think we made it possible for him to become a judge. Craig Levin. Craig.
Hi, good morning. Hey, Fernando. Hey, Drew.
Good morning, Craig. I think
Thank you for having me on.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Just in case I appear before you, I have to remember that.
Well, I owe it all to you guys, so don't worry, you'll be fine.
Excellent. Anyway, I was just taking credit for your victory here, which is
I heard.
It's a Republican thing.
Congratulations, future Judge Levin, I should say. But so when do you get is it January or February? Is that when you were
I
sworn
believe
in?
we get sworn in January 3rd.
Nice. Well,
is
congratulations.
what my understanding is. Thank you.
Congratulations. Well, you still have time to relax before taking on those heavy duties.
I don't know. I got a law practice that is calling my name, so it's been keeping me busy for the last few months.
Okay, so you're not necessarily just relaxing, huh?
No, not at all.
So, Craig, since we have you here, and my friend Drew Murray here is a Republican victories around, how do you see the results of this election?
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, it's disappointing. The Republicans swept our statewide judge, the appellate judges. I think they're just maybe since the presidential election, there's just people are tired of politics, and especially in Philadelphia, we didn't come out and vote the way we could have. I mean, the voter turnout was low. I think it was around 19%, and we have to do better. And if we don't do better, I mean, the Republicans are vigilant and they're motivated, and they came out and voted, and the Democrats didn't come out and vote. And that's why we saw the results that we got. And we lost an opportunity to pick up 4 seats, you know, 1 on the Supreme Court, 2 on the Commonwealth Court, 1 on the Superior Court. So I think hopefully things will change as the focus turns to the governor and the U.S. Senate. I think the Democrats will come out in force for those elections. At least I hope.
So, Craig, on the show we have today Leticia Roa Nixon. She's a journalist, and she's has a long career in Philly, reporting on politics and immigration and all the issues that affect Hispanics. What you just said about the low turnout for the vote is one of the things that Leticia and I and other Hispanic journalists have been concerned about, the Hispanics not showing up to vote, and then they complain that the politicians do not spend money in the community. Well, so it's like the two things go together.
It's especially in the last election, the elections for judges. You know, the district attorney wasn't much of a race. There was no real reason to bring people out. Nobody really knows judges. We're not allowed to be politicians and put out platforms and kind of make public appearances like that. So that public doesn't know a lot, and I think a lot of people didn't even know there was an election. But we have to do a better job of motivating people in the city, explaining to them how important it is and how judges really affect your lives, probably more so than a governor or a U.S. senator. So I think we have to do a better job of that.
Yeah, I think what you just said about judges not being politicians, I think somebody should break the news to other Republican judges that got elected during the Trump administration.
Well, you have to let me speak to that then, Mr. Mendez. I think someone should remind the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, including one, Mr. Kevin Doherty, who was basically that election was bought by his brother, that they legislated from the bench last year during the election season. They took Act 70 and turned it on its head. They legislated from the bench. So I think we're going to have to say it on both sides. And I also want to remind you, Mr. Mendez, because you said the Latinos didn't come out to vote. I'm going to imagine that I'm going to guess that you didn't know, because we talked about right before you came on, how many of the judges did you know that you voted for? And I'm gonna ask you a question.
That I knew in person.
I know you know Judge. No, there's one that you know. I bet you didn't even know he was on the ballot. Do you know who that is? Did you read the ballot?
No.
Christian DeChico. Did you
Chico,
know
well, I
Christian?
saw the name. Yes, I saw the name.
You know, another prep guy. Another
But
prep guy.
I saw the name.
And then another prep connection was Megan Sullivan, who you coached her younger brother. And I'm sure you know Larry Sullivan. If we're really going to look at people and not party, which you really should do with judges, and you didn't even know that Megan Sullivan was running not even for a local municipal court, a statewide superior court position. You didn't even know she was running. So if we're going to really talk about, are we looking at people or party? I'm gonna question whether you even looked on the other side.
Drew, extremely unfair. That is inside baseball. You know the people from St. Joe's Prep. So how many people out in the world know all these St. Joe's Prep connections? So I don't know. Leticia, would you have a question for the recently elected judge?
Well, I agree with Mr. Levin thoroughly. And I think even though judges are not politicians, I think as news reporters, we should also inform the choices that the electorate has. WHYY has done a great job, pages and pages of an article of who is who and what you can expect of the outcome. I also agree with Mr. Levin. Judges are very important. You just think governor, senator, president. I was an official court interpreter for the Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia for 28 years. And I know on a daily basis how important it is to have a fair judge. So, yes, we need to go out, we need to motivate, and I agree with Mr. Drew Murrey that they're highly motivated. They have pushed forward to get the votes, and that's the outcome. No, now they won, and we need just to be more aware and responsible as voters to vote in each election.
So a question for everybody. Is this the result of still Mr. Trump being sort of the shadow behind everybody?
I'll address that. I think it has a lot to do with the motivation of the Republicans. I was hoping that it also would motivate the Democrats to come out, no matter what the election is, and just come out and vote Democrat. I mean, Drew made a great point, and that's most people don't know anything about the judges. We're not in position, even the statewide candidates, to raise a lot of money where you can go on TV and let people know who you are. It's difficult to make somebody running for judge be a politician, and I think the public suffers for that. In a lot of ways, they'll rely on groups for recommendations, but a lot of times you're walking into the voting booth and you don't know one candidate, you don't know the first thing about the candidate. So it's really something that, from a grassroots perspective, we have to go out and let people know who we are. And I think the pandemic really hurt a lot in the last year or two because there weren't a lot of in-person gatherings. And to Drew's point, I'll take an exception to our Supreme Court. They did make some rulings, but I think it was in light of what was going on with the post office, what was going on with the pandemic. I think if times were normal pre-pandemic, that we wouldn't have seen those kind of rulings. But I think under the circumstances, they made some rulings, but it really didn't affect the outcome of that election.
Sure. And I will say I have a rule that I don't vote for anyone if I don't at least know them or know something about them. And when you go in and you just see all of these judges, most people aren't going to know everything. So I will tell you, and since there were no Republicans on the municipal ballot as far as judges, I voted for Craig, I voted for Christian, and I voted for Wendy Barish. So because I knew them or knew of them or knew some of their policies, even if I disagree with some of their quote unquote, even though they're not supposed to have policies as judges, even if I disagree with them on some things, I knew them, I knew they were good people. And as a ward leader in the city of Philadelphia, as a Republican, there were no Republican candidates. So I felt that I could vote for them. So I did. Now, to go back to your original question, I'm going to say it's the opposite, Mr. Mendez. We won without President Trump. And I think we've proven that we can and should do that. I know we're talking about judges now, but we had a huge, huge victory in Virginia and a very close race in New Jersey that no one expected. I mean, let's also look at the guy who spent $157 and took over the most powerful person in the state Senate in New Jersey. And the state and the governor's race is probably, Governor Murphy probably won, but it isn't over. It is that close that they need to count every single vote. I think that was proven that, look, we can do this without Trump. Not that they weren't somewhat allied to Trump, but we did it without Trump. And we did it because the economy is going down the toilet, to put it bluntly. We see it every time we fill up our gas tank. I see it in my business where I sell museum cabinets and all steel products. Material cost is up 60%. People are looking at this inflation and realizing that we're not building back better, that when you keep sending money to people, they're not going to go to work. They're not going to get out there. And we have a huge labor shortage right now, which is why we're having supply chain issues. People said, this is not going to work. Pass the infrastructure bill that has already been passed, but the rest of it, the infrastructure bill that has to do with actual infrastructure, but the rest of it are socialistic policies that we do not need and that's already failing. We're just seeing a glimpse of it right now with the incredible inflation we're having. And I think people went to the polls and they said, we do not want what the Democrats are selling to us right now. I think most people want people who are somewhat in the middle. You know, I say I'm a moderate. I lean right. They don't want far left, and I don't think they want far right either. The majority of the world wants people who can look at issues and maybe sometimes lean left. I mean, I lean much more right, but there are policies that I'll lean left, and that's why I'm a moderate, and that's why I look at issues and look at what is the best possible result and what are the best policies, not just I'm on the left, this is what I have to do, or I'm on the right, this is what I have to do. I think that's what you saw on Tuesday. People rejecting Biden. I won't say what, I'm not going to say the let's go Brandon, as funny as I do think it is, but they are rejecting President Biden and the rest of the far left Democratic Party.
I don't think it was so much a rejection of that. I think the Democrats, they say, but don't do anything but your enemy as long as he's shooting himself in the foot. The Democrats were doing that all along by fighting inside, intra-party fighting. And that didn't help Biden when he traveled to Europe, and it certainly didn't help in the Virginia election. If they had something to run with, and that's where the Republicans are right at this point, fighting the Democrats on everything, not proposing anything. As you say, there are so many things we don't need, according to you, in that bill. We don't need a good education. We don't need reform of immigration. We don't need justice in the courts. All the stuff. I mean, are you kidding me? The Republicans at this point stand for nothing. Donald Trump ran on a platform that was empty. It was all about elect me because I'm Donald Trump. That was it. And that's what I have to say about that particular topic.
Well, I have to disagree with you there, Mr. Mendez. We care about education. We want, in fact, a lot of it is we want parents more involved in the educational choices for our children. I am pro-immigration. You know that, Mr. Mendez.
Yes.
Am I opposed to sanctuary cities? Yes. Do I think people need to come into this country legally? Yes. But I would love to see. We're a city. We talk about Philadelphia. We used to be 2 million. Now we're 1.5. I would love to see 500,000 immigrants come to our city because it will make our city greater. So I am pro-immigration, as are many, many Republicans. In fact, I'd say most Republicans. So to say that we are opposed to things, we voted for the infrastructure bill, the part of it that actually had to do with infrastructure. We want to put money back into the economy. We want government spending because we think we need it because of the pandemic, and our infrastructure is crumbling. We don't want things like government getting involved in every single business decision, like, automatic paid family leave, which honestly, I would look at that and I would say, okay, is that something that is good or bad? Or is it something that we're just getting involved too much in business? We need lower taxes. The city of Philadelphia specifically, when you talk on a municipal level, our taxes are ridiculous and we need lower taxes. That's what Republicans want. They want smaller government and lower taxes. We're fine with immigration as long as it's done correctly. We want better education. We're seeing schools crumbling in the city of Philadelphia. We want money put into our schools. So it has nothing to do with that. So you said I was unfair earlier when I just told you didn't know most of the judges, which was a fact. You're being unfair by generalizing.
Actually, I didn't know most of them. We did get to know many of them because many of them came to Usala, so that we even did make some commercials for them. So we got to meet some of them.
Sure.
I don't know, as you know, the history of these people who are familiar to you because they are from St. Joe's Prep, but that's ridiculous to go there. Anyway,
well, you did teach there for 40 years.
We're going to take a brief break here, very brief break in Usala Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Drew Murrey, representing the wrong side of the issues today, Greg Levin with that, and Leticia Roa Nixon. We'll come back in a minute. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Round Table. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de UCA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Round Table. Tenemos a Drew Murray con nosotros, the newly elected Judge Craig Levin, and Leticia Roa Nixon nos acompaña también en el día de hoy. Estamos en una conversación bastante interesante sobre la elección que acaba de ocurrir y los resultados que no favorecen a los demócratas. Vamos a ver qué pasa con el resto de esta conversación. So, anybody has a comment on the last exchange with Drew about what Republicans are all about? Because now all of a sudden there's a kind humanitarian Republican by my side. It's a very rara avis, as they say in Latin.
Drew sounds like a very reasonable Republican. So if all Republicans were like that, I think things would be different. I wonder how he feels, and I had this discussion with somebody last night, whether he feels that the election was stolen from Trump, and because I think that's been a driving force for the Republican Party, the breaking down of the norms, the breaking down of our institutions, and really our democratic way of life really depends on voting and having that democratic process. And I'd be interested in Drew's views on that, because I was trying to explain to somebody last night who said, we cheated in Pennsylvania, we cheated in Philadelphia. All these votes came in after Election Day, and they came out of nowhere. And I tried to explain to them that they were mail-in votes, that the Republicans who run the state legislature wouldn't let us start counting until 7 o'clock Election Day. And you can't possibly count hundreds of thousands of mail-in votes in the span of a 13-hour election day. So I was going nowhere with that conversation, because they were saying these votes came out of nowhere. And no matter, I even explained that there were certain Republican counties that didn't start counting mail-in votes until the day after the election, because they didn't have the manpower to do so. So I think where we're running, if you're a reasonable Republican, which Drew sounds like he is, and from what I know, he's been that way. But I think a bigger problem is a big part of our country that believes that the election was stolen, and there's a lot of anger out there because they do love and care about our country, just in different ways. So I don't know how Drew feels on that issue.
Sure. No, I do not. I think President Trump lost, and I think he is the only one to blame for losing. It was his to lose. Do I think there is some election fraud? Yes, there always is, and there always will be. We're never going to get to the point where it's zero. Do I think it's widespread? No, I do not. But part of the problem is a lot of people do feel that there's fraud. And is President Trump to blame on that? Yeah, he's a big part of that blame. And right now, a lot of people don't trust elections. When I was knocking on doors for Chuck Peruto, there were a lot of Republicans who said, "Why should I vote? It's all great." And I would tell them, if you feel that way, then we've already lost. You know, you have to trust the elections, and if you don't vote, then you're doing the same thing as if there was cheating. And I don't think there is widespread cheating. You know, when Act 77 came out, I was in favor of it. And in fact, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I still might be in favor of it. But the state was not ready, and most states were not ready for that level of mail-in voting. They weren't, and they couldn't prepare for it. I think there are a lot of things that need to be done to improve Act 77. I mean, there were committee people who I know were ballot harvesting. They weren't doing it on purpose. They thought they were doing a nice thing. They didn't realize it was illegal. And in fact, I didn't even see this, Mr. Mendez. You sent me something this morning that the governor's wife was ballot harvesting by bringing her own husband's ballot to whether the mailbox or the polling place. I'm sure she didn't realize what she was doing was illegal, but a lot of people didn't realize that. And when people see things like that, it brings to mind that maybe there is cheating, because if you are ballot harvesting, there's only a small step further that you start helping people fill out their ballots and things like that. So Act 77, I'm not sure if I'm still in favor of it. I'm in favor of giving the people the opportunity to vote as much as possible, make it as easy as possible within reason. But looking back in hindsight, and hindsight is 2020, Act 77 may not have been the best thing that we did. We need more secure elections, if for no other reason, to take the perception away from people who do believe that there was widespread cheating. So it's a tough thing to balance. And, you know, one thing I would say as a compromise, and I know Democrats hate to hear this, but we need some level of voter ID when you go into the polling station, and some level of voter ID, even with the mail-in ballots. We need to do something to make it more secure, even if it's by perception. And there is legislation out there now, Mr. Mendez, that would cost anyone $0 to get that ID. So cost is no longer a factor. And then even if you don't have that ID, you can sign an affidavit when you go and vote, just stating that you are that person. And Democrats are still saying that they don't want that. So, you know, there has to be a level of compromise. Act 77, I think, has flaws in there. And whether it's through education of telling people what they can and can't do, or it's maybe having a more strict level of voter ID law, we need to do something, because the perception of a lot of people, and it's not just Republicans, they don't believe our elections are secure. And it might be perception more than reality, but if perception is keeping people from voting, that's a big problem.
Well, I think it's based on the propaganda during the Trump administration. He was always talking about fake news. He was the one who produced fake news. I think the fraud is a lie. I really, truly do. And Lou, the boy, was really putting hurdles for the ballots to reach the place. And Drew, with all respect, I don't think we need an ID to vote. I really don't. And I think when you put that requirement to show who you are and know that people are voting, the one that was used his mother, a dead mother, was a Republican. And it has been documented that there was no fraud. So I think if you make it harder for people to vote, people are not going to vote. And that's unfair. It's not democratic at all. People cannot get an ID easily, as you well know, like African Americans who have been in jail. There are a lot of things that minorities don't have an ID and they should vote. So I really disagree to put more hurdles for people to go to vote. It's very easy to believe what you want to believe. If you want to believe there was fraud and Donald Trump didn't win, that's one thing. But you just have to prove it as in the court and with facts, not only with rhetorics.
I'm in the odd position of agreeing with Drew on this issue. When I was co-hosting another program with my loony lefty friend, Pedro Rodriguez, we had this argument all the time. And I said, how long do you need? How long do you need to get everybody with a proper ID, with a picture ID, so that we know who you are and we know exactly where you live and how you vote. So give me a frame of time, and so that we make sure you need months, you need a year for the next election in 2022, for 2024. You tell me when. Uh, Everybody, we have computers now, we have technology that can easily identify any individual. So why can't we have a national ID that if you're going to vote, this is who you are? I, so I disagree with Letty and with the other people who are opposed to an ID. I don't see why.
I knew the Jesuits taught you something well, Mr. Mendez.
It's one of the things. It sounds like a legitimate opposition to say I don't want ID because it makes it more difficult. It's not legitimate. There are so many ways to get a proper ID from the state government, from the city government. Mexicans even got IDs from the Mexican consulate that were supposed to be accepted. So that's not
They
anything
cannot vote,
that we should
maybe.
object. So I know our judge here, who can tell us his legal opinion on this.
Well, I think for people like us, it's fairly simple for us to get an ID, but for other people, people in assisted living, in nursing homes, people who are underserved in communities that don't have access, it sounds really easy. I took care of my father for many years while he was in assisted living in a nursing home, and he was a committee man, and always wanted to vote. But he wasn't driving, and for me to get him an ID, I'd have to take a day off of work. But he has access to me. There's a lot of people in assisted living or nursing homes that don't have the ability to do that, and then they lose their right to vote. So I think it does affect some people differently. It makes it more difficult. Unfortunately, a lot of those people tend to be Democrats, and that makes it a lot more difficult. But the mail-in voting, there are a lot of checks and balances on mail-in voting. And by the way, this was passed by the Republican legislature in Pennsylvania. They run our state legislature, and I believe there was one senator and maybe two representatives that voted against it. So it was overwhelmingly a Republican passed bill. And in return, they got to take away the straight ticket voting, which is really hurt the Democrats in the last two elections. So, and I had this discussion with the Republican. I said, why would the Republicans give us mail-in voting if it's so easy to commit fraud? They know that there's not a lot of fraud there. Listen, ballot harvesting, why it's against the rules, against the law, it doesn't mean there's fraud. It means that somebody's picking up somebody else's ballot and dropping it off, and that's not supposed to happen. But it doesn't mean that they're taking ballots and fraudulently filling it out. And that line really has to be drawn so people understand that if Governor Wolf's wife takes his ballot and drops it in the mailbox or mail drop, it's against the rules, but it's not like she's filling out his ballot or committing fraud. And I think people need to understand that, because otherwise that ballot harvesting gets to be sensationalized.
No, and I agree. And I said that obviously the governor's wife didn't know she was doing anything illegal, and part of it needs to be education, because and obviously that's a small example, but I know a lot of committee people in the city of Philadelphia who did pick them up, and I don't think there was fraud, at least the ones I know personally, because I know they would not do that.
Right, they're trying to provide a service for the community. And,
yeah, but it is illegal.
There's a lot of education that needs to go on,
yes,
and it's a new law. So anytime there's a new law, there's kinks. There's going to be amendments that need to be made. There's going to be places. It was just the timing of it, in probably the biggest election ever in the history of this country. The timing of it was really poor to try to get everything done. But I there's so many checks and balances. You really can't commit widespread fraud with mail-in ballots. It's just I during the pandemic, I went and moved to my father-in-law's house so my whole family could be there, and we put a forwarding order on our mail, and they would not forward our ballots. They returned them. and I had to go vote in person. So there's a lot of checks and balances that people aren't aware of that would make it very difficult to commit any type of widespread fraud that would affect any election. Is there going to be fraud? There could be 10, 20, 100, 200, but none of that's ever going to affect the outcome of an election.
Sure. And Act 77, and I know you didn't really mean it, but it was a bipartisan bill. It wasn't just all Republicans that voted for it.
But it couldn't have passed without
it
the
was-
Republicans.
No, yeah, but it was,
And
bipartisan.
I could say this because I had breakfast with a state representative the Saturday before that bill was, and he was livid because Governor Wolf didn't really consult with any of the Democrats. And because they didn't want to lose straight ticket voting. And I don't think the Democrats would have really ended up supporting that bill if it wasn't done in the way it was done.
Well, I don't know. I don't want Drew to get away with saying that the last election was there was too much fraud or anything, because Chris Krebs, who ran the whole thing in November of 2020, certified that it was the cleanest election in U.S. history. And since then, every challenge in every court of the land has been lost by the Republicans, who keep claiming that there was fraud. So I think that there may have been a few cases, and as Leticia pointed out, one of them was a Republican. But I think for the most part, it was a clean election, and it's a myth that it was a fraudulent election. So
I didn't say it was fraudulent. I said I said it wasn't stolen.
But you said there was fraud, and I was thinking.
Well, no, there's what I said, Mr. Mendez. There's always fraud, absolutely. Even Democrats and Republicans will admit that. I said it wasn't widespread. In fact, why would I want to reverse what happened in the state of Pennsylvania, even during the presidential election when we had Tim DeFore and Stacey Garrity win? We won the Auditor General, and we won the state treasurer. It was a win overall.
Yes.
Are you going to say that was a fraud?
Even killers go to church, so like it doesn't matter. There was some fraud, I'm sure. Anyway, we're going to take another very brief pause here en Nuestra Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Estamos con Drew Murrey, the Judge Craig Levin, and mi amiga Leticia Nixon. Regresamos en un momento.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But I get it, you're busy, and busy people can't have prediabetes. I read that wrong. They can, okay? Just go to the site.
Toma menos de un minuto saber si está usted en riesgo de padecer prediabetes. Puede averiguarlo aquí. Visite esta página.
In other words, Luis said, Drew's winning the debate.
Sí. Señores oyentes de Ustra Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo. En su programa La Mesa Redonda, les habla Fernando Méndez, Leticia Nixon con nosotros, Drew Murray next to me, and the newly elected Judge Craig Levin. So, more hot potatoes that we have. Actually, in Washington, they're voting today, supposedly, finally, after all this crazy debate, supposedly they're voting today, and we may get something. What the Democrats need to do something very concrete, to put money in people's pockets, to show that they're doing something. Otherwise, they're lost. The 2022 election will be bad, and forget about 2040 if they don't achieve some of the things that Biden promised and to get elected. So that's what I think. Any questions? No?
Do you think the bill should be passed on? There's two bills. There's the infrastructure bill, and then there's the society, the social infrastructure bill. There's two. Do you think both should be passed?
I think both. I think both. I think they need to do something drastic. Look, they complain. I mean, they were criticizing Biden for acting like FDR. Well, this is probably one of those times in which we need somebody to do what FDR did and change the direction of the country altogether. And how are you going to do that? With money. Actually, put money in real places. I always give the example of the $20 billion JFK put in Latin America with his Alliance for Progress that actually changed the lives of people all over the continent. And that was $20 billion in 1960 money. So imagine what that would do today. So I think that they need to put money, they need to pass the bills, they need to actually do something concrete. That's my belief, anyway. Otherwise, Republicans are going to come back and say, "Oh, look at that! They did nothing." Oh, Mitch McConnell will be dancing in the streets if nothing happens.
Well, the Republicans have agreed to the infrastructure bill. What we're not agreeing to, and what Democrats or some Democrats are not agreeing to, is the social infrastructure bill. And I do not think we should pass it. Look, I think there's some important things in there. I'm an environmentalist. We absolutely, I believe that humans are affecting the climate, and we need to do something somewhat drastic. And I'm fine with a lot of the things in that bill. I think we got to be somewhat realistic on some things. But what we're seeing here, Mr. Mendez, today, and you don't have any young children, the child tax credit is doing nothing but allowing people to stay at home and not work. Why I'm getting a check every month, I do not know. I should not be. I don't. Look, we can all need it.
Well, you should return it.
It's paying for the increase in the gas
You
price.
should return it.
And what I'm paying, it's a small amount compared to most. But when you send thousands of dollars to people to not work, this is the problem that we're seeing. We're seeing supply chain issues. We are seeing what socialism can do because we're sending people enough money that they do not have to work. Many people, I'm not saying all, I'm not saying most. Many people will not work if they have enough money to get by. And that's what we are seeing right now. That is why we're seeing supply chain issues. That is why the price of gas is going up. That is why the price of steel is skyrocketing. That is why you can't even buy a new car now because there aren't any new cars on the lots. That's why you're starting to see empty shelves
Well, what does it
in
have
the
to do with?
supermarket. It has to do with people not going to work. People are choosing. They're calling it not the great retirement. People are saying, if I don't have to work, if someone is getting $3,000 a month from the government from a child tax credit standpoint, and their mortgage is $1,000, and their food and other bills are
Great
$1,000,
resignation,
they are
yes.
literally the Great Resignation. They don't have to go to work. They're getting disposable income, not even covering their bills. They're having disposable income above that, and they're not going to go to work. That's why you see so many help wanted signs. The government shouldn't intervene the way they are. The market should determine the price of goods and the price of labor, and that's how capitalism works. When the government gets involved and sends huge amounts of money, I'm not saying we don't help people who need it. We absolutely should. During the pandemic, we increased unemployment. Absolutely should have been done. Money should have been sent to families during the pandemic. The pandemic, we're coming to an end. We're still sending people too much money, and this is what we're seeing. We're seeing it at the gas pump. We're seeing it in the supermarket. We're seeing empty shelves, and this is just the beginning. That is why we should not pass the other side of the infrastructure bill.
The supply chain is a problem. I mean, that's it's taken for granted right now. A lot of that has to do with chip technology. That's why there are no cars in the lots. That a lot of things that have nothing to do with whether or not this administration is giving people money. But I agree to some extent that they have to take a look at all how the money's spent and where it's going. But there is a need right now to have a great impact, put money in people's pockets, real effect on their lives to change the course of things. Because otherwise, if it's just a trickle down economy, which is what Reagan did to this country, I don't know. That's not going to work either. Craig?
These are issues that are above my pay grade. I've been kind of wrapped up in running my practice and running for election, so I haven't been as versed as I normally would be in these issues. So I don't know what the answer is. I know that the pandemic has fundamentally changed our country in so many ways. This is one of the ways, and I think right now we're just in an adjustment period where people are just starting to come back to work, back to offices. So that means there's more demand on restaurants and goods and stores. And I think maybe they're lagging behind a little bit. And, one great thing about this country, sometimes it takes a long time, but, sooner or later we figure it out. And I think we're just kind of in that period right now where we're trying to figure out what's best for this country, what's the best way to move forward, what's the best way for all our citizens. At the same time, we're more divided than ever. And, I don't know if these infrastructure bills will make a huge difference or not make a huge difference, but there seems to be no agreement between the Democrats and the Republicans. And that's I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it's like speaking two different languages. I think there's no real communication. Republicans don't want to hear certain things. They certainly are trying to make us forget about January 6th, which is pretty much in the headlines, what happened on January 6th, because that was an attempt to destroy democracy, to overturn the election. So we shouldn't forget. I keep every chance I get, I remind people that that happened, that it was a real event, that Donald Trump put people on the road to an insurrection. And I don't think we should forget that. 2022 is around the corner. 2024, they threat again. The threat is that Donald Trump will run once more. I don't know how that's possible, but it could happen. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the environment, because we just had a huge meeting in Glasgow, absent China, one of the big polluters in the world. And so as long as they don't sign on to this, China and India, we need to have those huge economies, huge contributors to climate warming, to come and join the conversation. But one of the things, I mean, Drew just mentioned it, we do need to get involved in dealing with the effects of the climate, what is happening. We can see it every day. Look at, we just had the warmest October in history. So it's happening right now. Leticia.
Well, just going back a little bit, what Drew was saying and what Craig was saying, and that's so true. We have to see the roots of why people like the shortage of school bus drivers. I think that affects a lot of Philadelphia, and to see the root, because in 36 years I've been living here, I never saw that before. So you have to take the whole problem in a very holistic way and seeing who is working, why is not working, and all that. But definitely it's not a simple answer, but we have to be all accountable. And I agree with Drew. For example, I was unemployed for a year and a half and I didn't get any stimulus checks or anything. So we have to really work together, more bipartisan. And yes, we're very divided, but when it's the well being of our families, our children, our neighbors, we should come together. About the climate crisis, definitely, Fernando, the two great absentees were, well, the great absentee was China. And what I heard about the outcome of this COP26 26 meeting was not very inspiring. They all agree that we have a problem and see you. No, I think we should work on it, as Drew said. Start with yourself, how much you are polluting, and also is it fracking necessary, and also other industries that are very profitable, but are really affecting the air we breathe. So at the end of the day, I think we should come all together and set aside our ideological differences, because we are living in this planet together. And the more we put in our individual solutions, we can become a more greater collective grassroots solution.
Well, that UN report said we only have a couple of decades to come around and fix the problem, so I try to deal with it. So I hope Biden at least was very strong in his support of the whole thing, as opposed to Mr. Trump, who withdrew us from the Paris Accords. It's a whole different change of direction for this country. So if there were Republicans in power right now, nobody would be worried about the environment.
Well, I disagree with President Trump pulling us out of the Paris Accords, but there were legitimate reasons. And we should not have done it. But the reasons were people like China were not coming in and doing their part. It was asking a lot of the United States, but not asking a lot of the rest of the world to do their part. We should not have pulled out. I'm not saying that was right. I'm saying it goes beyond not wanting to help the environment. It was everyone needs to do their part. Number one, which is China. And Leticia, I'm glad you brought up the school bus driver shortage, because whenever Mr. Mendez asks me to come on, I'm always very busy, because I'm literally driving my daughters to school every morning and every afternoon. Talk about what's bad for the environment. There's twice as many cars on the road driving their children to school because we don't have bus drivers. And that might have to do with the vaccine mandates that are going on. And that's a really complicated issue. And I kind of see both sides of that story. But I think you're seeing a lot of people who are not getting vaccinated. And that is part of the supply chain issue as well, as part of the labor issue, because there are people who are going to start to get fired because they are refusing to get the vaccine. And, again, that is one of those topics I can really see both sides of that issue, and understand both sides. But we're going to see that become a huge issue in the very near future.
We're going to take the last break here en Usa la Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez. Drew Murrey nos acompaña hoy, Leticia Roa Nixon, and Judge Danny Ramos controla la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Once there was a boy who did the same thing again and again. One day, he was told he had autism. He got help and slowly learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Señoras y señores de USA la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, The Round Table. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Leticia Rowanix nos acompaña, Drew Murray next to me, representing the wrong side of the issues, and Craig Levin, it's recently elected judge. So, Craig, you want to say something about why you want to be in this common pleas court?
Well, I've been a lawyer for 34 years, and I get to see good judges, bad judges, litigants, and I just feel at this point in my career, I want to finish it out, serve this city. I've lived here, been part of this city my whole life. I love this city for better or for worse. And I think I can make a difference in people's lives. I understand what it's like to be a lawyer and work and have to walk into a courtroom and what the litigants feel like. And I've dealt with like everyday Philadelphians with everyday problems, and that's what you see in the courtroom. So I think I could be fair, and I think that's a big thing, because I really believe life isn't fair in so many respects. But when you get into a courtroom, you could really right some wrongs, and that's why I want to be a judge.
Oh, great. So, by the way, we're getting more coverage. We're on Facebook and other platforms, so that a lot of people can hear what we're saying here today. So I'm sorry, you're not representing the wrong side of the issue. It's just happen to be a Republican. So what are we going to do about that?
I will never go back to the party, Democratic Party, Mr. Mendez. Not as long as they're socialists.
No, no socialism. Socialism, that's a misnomer. The only people who want to be socialists are the true Marxists who think that socialism sounds better, so that, but we can see what a true Marxist is doing right now in Nicaragua. It's atrocious what's happening there, but that's an issue for another day. I think Leticia will come back and we'll talk about that. Nicaragua, it's a problem right now. It's a problem for this country too. We don't have that many friends in Latin America, and we need right now, for instance, we need Colombia to be more of a stronger ally for this country. And there was a point when Obama came to the presidency. I don't think he realized that Colombia was the only friend we had in South America at that point. Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, everybody was a leftist, Venezuela, and the only friend we had was Colombia. And Obama didn't realize that, and so he was attacking Colombia, saying there was human rights abuses, when the only human rights being abused were those of the terrorists in Colombia. So that's it's an issue again for another day, but it reminds me of all this stuff that we're talking about. One last thing, one topic here that is hot right now. The Supreme Court is meeting, and people are talking about Roe versus Wade. I know Craig is probably hesitant to get involved in this discussion about Roe versus Wade, but it's happening. I think. Just tell us one thing. You think it would change?
Oh, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I can't really comment on that issue. I'm not permitted. but I think there's a lot of people in this country on both sides that are very anxious about what's going to happen there.
Yeah. Leticia, what do you think?
Well, since I'm the only woman in this panel, I always think that you have the right to choose as a woman. And I know that many religions will be against it, but also it's a fact that there are many women who might look for an abortion in back alleys and not in the in a clinic or under a doctor's um, experience, to do all that. So I think when you become so orthodox or just one-minded, that's dangerous for democracy. Definitely, I
Yeah,
can
what's
see
happening in Texas, for instance, is
in
an atrocity.
dictatorships. You see it all the time, and as you just mentioned, Nicaragua is a dictatorship. So yes, when you are forced as a woman to certain things, um,
Yeah.
so that's my personal opinion, and as a woman.
Texas, I just like what the governor did. They're sort of enabling vigilante.
I don't agree with the
so-
vigilantes, but do I think Roe v. Wade is about to be overturned? No. Do I hope it does? Absolutely. As a former fetus, I don't think it matters if you're a woman or a man. We all deserve an opinion on this. And to keep hearing women saying you have no right to put anything on my body, we need to remember there are two bodies, and it's not just one. And life isn't fair sometimes. The Texas heartbeat bill, other than the vigilante side of it, I agree 100%. As a Catholic, as a father, I believe that child has a right to live as much as anyone. And the viability argument of 20 weeks, as number one, is already out the window, because if we're going to talk about viability, then with the technology that we have today, viability is easily at 15 weeks. It's absolutely a baby. I believe it's a baby, a conception. Is that because I'm a Catholic? No, it's because none of us know exactly when it begins. Right now, Democrats used to say, and it was a Bill Clinton quote, I believe it was legal, safe, and rare. That's what Democrats used to say. And I could understand that a little more, Mr. Mendez. Now Democrats are saying, and this is true, and the reproductive rights bill in New York states this. So Democrats cannot argue this. They want abortion up until 9 months for whatever reason. And that is defined and codified in law and the Reproductive Act in New York. To me, I could have a conversation of the Bill Clintons of the world who said it should be rare. I can't have conversations with people who think abortion should happen up until 9 months and codify that in law. I had a sister who was pregnant at 15. Everyone would have told her she should never have that baby. My niece Caitlin, Mr. Mendez. If my sister made that horrible choice of abortion, I would not have a niece named Caitlin. I would not have two great grandnephews. I would not have a great grandniece. And everyone says, well, at 15, how do you have a baby? She had a baby because she fought hard and she was a strong woman and she did the right thing, plain and simple.
Those are particular cases that obviously we feel close to things like that affect us personally. I think in general, I agree with you. The Clinton principles are probably more applicable and more practical in a way. I think the Abbott, Governor Abbott in Texas, that kind of stuff is an abomination. I don't think that should be allowed to happen. But here we are. Anyway, we are getting to the end of this program. I want to thank all of you for taking part. Judge Levin, we wish you the best in your court. We hope never to have to appear before you.
You might, Mr. Mendez.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for coming, Leticia. Thank you again. And you were invited. We had to talk about Nicaragua next. And my friend Drew, I'm sorry that I said you represent the wrong side of the issue, but sometimes you do. So here we are. So thank you for coming to us.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. And I'm sorry that you represent the wrong side of a lot of issues as well.
Señores oyentes de USA La Radio, hemos llegado al final de esta edición. Muchas gracias por su sintonía en el día de hoy. Se despide Fernando Mendez con Leticia Roa Nixon, Craig Levin, mi amigo, my friend, Drew Murrey. Hasta la próxima. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Round Table. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.